It's quite old, you see, it has to warm up, yeah? Sorry.
Okay, so we are live.
Okay. So we're continuing with the talks by Srila Bhakti Rakak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, Paramhansa Vaishnav Guru from Navadip Dham, and then he's selected from his discourses or talks, informal talks mainly, and we're trying to organize them into a form, and this is roughly following the three parts of or aspects of devotional service. Holy Trinity, you might say. That is Sambandha, the relationship. Our relationship means with the Lord and with the energies of the Lord, namely the Maya Shakti, the material energy, in which we're encased, and three modes of material nature, and the jiva, other jiva souls. So, relationship of the Lord with ourself with the Lord, ourself with the environment, means the Lord's energy, material energy, and the relationship of the material energy with the Lord, and so on. This is Sambandha, or relationship. Samabandha, what is binding together, joining together. And then Abhidheya, the means to the end, that is practice of devotional service, by which, or through which, we go from where we are at present, located, towards our ultimate destination, which is Prayojana, the goal of life, this love of the Lord, Krishna Prema. And you know the three acharyas associated with these three is Sanatana Goswami with the Sambandha, and his deity Madan Mohanji, and then Rupa Goswami of the Abhidheya, and Govindaji, Radha Govindaji, and then Raghunath Das Goswami is the Prayojana Charja, and his deity is Radha Gopinath. So in this way, our acquaintance with the Lord is gradually developing from Madan Mohan. Madan Mohan means the who Lord is the who makes Cupid to be mad, you can say. Madan, mad. Mohan is so attractive that millions of Cupids swoon at his feet, like in Brahma Samhita. So this is the initial, you could say, meeting with the Lord. For example, most people who join in Krishna consciousness, whichever way they come, is usually they see a picture of Krishna, some representation of Krishna, in the threefold bending form of the flute with Radha. And this way, this supremely attractive Madan Mohanju, Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohanju. So this is the initial attraction that gives some connection or some interest to go forward, or some desire to go towards the Lord. But at that point, the service hasn't really been established. There's an attraction and there's some movement of the heart, the mind, towards the Lord. And then Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he calls Govinda, Radha Govindaji, the deities of Rupa Goswami, at that stage of Abhidheya, the means to the end, the stage of practice, sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, then we have the actual practice of devotional service. There's Srila Prabhupada calls him the functional serving deity, or that we engage in our functional service. And then, of course, Radha Gopinath is Lord of the Gopis, supremely attractive Lord of the Gopis, Radha Gopinath. These, incidentally, I'm sure you may know, are the deities of Hapaniya. In Hapaniya Dham, the birthplace of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And just near the house, or in fact they say that the deity room was built on the actual room where he appeared. And then that has been obviously reconstructed. a beautiful little temple with 3 small domes there, white domes, and Radha Gopinath. So roughly speaking, his talks, we've tried to arrange them in this kind of a way. So the first section is called just remind myself. Oh yes, the call of the soul. So that's initially. Then part 2, the journey home, and part 3, the way of surrender. And so this one, I've been just working on this chapter 1 of the last part, the way of surrender, in which there are 4 chapters. And the first chapter is called Association of the Holy. And so the first section is called the different forms of devotion. And then Sridhar Maharaj, he says, we need association of the holy with our surrender. According to the intensity of surrender, one may have the association of the higher devotee, and that will help one to make progress fairly, properly, and also quickly. So he often said in different places about that our movement should be systematic, not haphazard. So even if we seem to be going along slowly, that's okay. Like we say, if you chant, 4 rounds in one day or 8 rounds regularly, every day, it's better than chanting 32 rounds in one day and then don't chant anything for a week. So the regularity in service is definitely very helpful. It's kind of like building things up, like the snowball effect. Yeah. So then this devotee asks, surrender is known as Atma Nivedan? Sridhar Maharaj, yes. And after Atma Nivedan, then Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran, Vandan, hearing, chanting, remembering, praying. There are different forms of devotion, but all are in Atma Nivedan. Their basis is Atma Nivedan, self-surrender. And then the devotee says, which you might have picked up on this, right? Generally, we hear that Atma Nivedan is given as the last in the 9 kinds of devotion, i.e. after Shravan, Kirtan, as if to say, they're all leading up to this Atma Nivedan. Sridhar Maharaj, the last, it is in the beginning also. It is everything and everywhere. And there's laughing. They laugh. The devotees present give a chuckle. Whoa, what is this? And Guru Maharaj says, without Atma Nivedan, self-surrender, no Shravan, hearing, is possible. And vice versa. Without hearing, surrender won't increase. They are interdependent. And it is so with all the limbs of devotion. They're all one. They're all bhakti. Without surrender, none of the devotional practices can be bhakti. But without hearing and other practices, which are based on a soul's sukriti, spiritual fortune, Atma Nivedan, surrender, may not come. So although for the purpose of our understanding, they are represented to us in different ways, or in a certain order, hearing, then chanting, then remembering, and so on, they're all interdependent and helping each other, and in this sense are one and the same. One part presupposes another. Shravan, hearing, comes first. But without kirtan, without chanting, how can there be hearing? How can you hear if there is no chanting? So that might be a little bit confusing to the new reader. Because normally we would say, okay, there's hearing, so hearing the names and glories of Krishna, and then from the hearing, then we're chanting them, as in, I would say repeating them, parrot fashion, but we're reproducing them by chanting. So I've had to put a little footnote here. Sridhar Maharaj is explaining that all the forms of devotion, hearing about the Lord, chanting his names and glories, remembering him and so on, are interdependent and all are bhakti, so in this sense are one. But while each of the 9 forms, Navalakshan, as they are called, of bhakti stand on their own, and by following any of them individually, since souls are naturally usually attracted to one of them particularly, or one or more of them. Some devotees like to hear, sit and hear the Bhagavatam, the Leelas or pastimes. Others like to chant, do kirtan, harinam. Others like to do archan and other services. And one can attain perfection in devotion through following any or each of them individually or in combination. Indeed, there are specific examples of this in the scriptures. Maharaj Parikshit attained such perfection by hearing, Shukadev Goswami by chanting, and so on. Still, taken together, there is a natural sequence, beginning with hearing about the Lord and culminating in Atmanivedan, full self-surrender. Though at the same time, that self-surrender is at the root of them all. So that's why Guru says it's the beginning and at the end and in the middle also. So Sridhar Maharaj's statement here that without kirtan, chanting, how can there be hearing, might appear at first to be in reverse order, because chanting the glories and names of the Lord is the natural result of first hearing them, rather than vice versa. But he is here simply making the point of their interdependence, and this is only a question of language. After all, the very act of chanting involves hearing both what you are chanting and also hearing what you have heard others chanting before that, on which your chanting is based. So there, just to confuse people even further. Okay, so that was there. Then back to the text. And then, smaran, remembering. Without such mental recollection, such memory, how can there be hearing and chanting? All are interdependent. And then the devotee says, so surrender is one's attitude and service is the activity? Sridhar Maharaj, no, not attitude. Surrender is not attitude. It is the innate nature of the soul. But it is covered at present by different kinds of dirt. The innate wealth, the innermost wealth of every jiva, every soul, is surrender. And service means surrender. It exists on the basis of surrender. I serve, I dedicate. Dedication, service, surrender, all are similar. All loving environment.
Is this the idea of surrender that the living entity who is extremely preoccupied with activities according to his sense of self, and the surrender is the natural quality of the soul, which is covered with wrong self-identification.
Yes.
So more the living entity gets rid of false self-identification, more it moves to the qualities of the soul, which is natural surrender.
Yes, it's an interesting point, because, as conditioned souls, if we're not aware or we're not in touch with our innate nature, which is surrender, or to surrender to the Lord, then in a sense, yes, we're sort of working from the outside in. We're engaging in the activities of devotional service, and, through that practice, gradually our inner sense of dedication and surrender is awakened. So it's both ways, So the surrendered soul, from their innate awakenment of their natural surrender of their self, then the services will follow as a natural result of that. Which is, what he's saying. So it's not like he said, it's not an attitude of surrender, like a mental attitude or something like that, and then the activity is service. Rather, the surrender is the nature of the soul, and then service naturally comes from that. So you can't really separate them. A surrendered soul is serving, and service itself is intimately connected with surrender. Because, for example, to take it to the higher level, in the spiritual domain, they're fully surrendered souls and they're fully engaged in service. So they're together. It's a little bit separate for us, conditioned souls. So as if we're trying to connect the two, and make them one, which is, so, yeah, in fact, he says that here, all loving environment is a subheading, and the nature, the very conception of the Vaikuntha world is service, and there every soul is unlimitedly surrendered, living only for the good of others. It is just the opposite here in the material world, where every unit wants to exploit another. Exploitation is in the plane of Maya, misconception. It exists only on the covering of the soul. But the innate substance of the soul is surrender, self-surrender. So in the Vaikuntha world, all are mad to help their neighbour, to look after the interest of others in connection with the supreme power. That is the innate wealth, the innate nature of every unit, of everything there. All cooperation, all goodness. All cooperation at the cost of one's own life is the nature of the inhabitants of Vaikuntha and Golok. How happy it is. But such degree of self-sacrificing requires that one must, in Hegel's expression, die to live. So here's the footnote on that. Hegel's expression, die to live, I think probably elsewhere in the text, in the book, in earlier chapters, I mentioned that, or Guru Maharaj saying die to live, but I hadn't really explained where that phrase comes from. So here it comes. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, 1770 to 1831, prominent philosopher in the school of German idealism. His writings are extremely dense and can appear complex and abstruse to those without any background in European philosophy. Sridhar Maharaj had studied Hegel in his college years and obviously appreciated his contribution for what he saw as its affinity with Vaishnava thought. In Hegel's view, the ultimate truth must be, by definition, the perfect, the ideal. And this also is called ideal realism. That which is ultimately real must be the ideal. Sridhar Maharaj writes, quote, Hegel's philosophy is sometimes described as panentheism, which proposes that God is present in all things, but in contrast to pantheism, it affirms that God is also an independent being, above and beyond all things. Hegel is also known for perfectionism. That's generally the New Age, philosophy of Gaia, Gaia, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. So God is nature directly, and there's no other God beyond nature separately from that. So we, by worshipping nature, worshipping God. It's a line of thought. But here we see that God is in everything and is the substance of everything. Krishna says in the Gita, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, that I, Vasudeva, Sarvam Iti, I am the substance of everything and the source of everything that exists. But at the same time, I am separate from everything and above everything in the created world. So this is Guru Maharaj speaking. Hegel says that the absolute is both conditioned and unconditioned combined. According to Hegel, the absolute is by itself and for itself. And he also used the German equivalent of the expression die to live. These expressions are very useful for those in the theistic line. If you want to have a progressive life, you will have to die as you are. Your ego must be dissolved, and then the real inner or finer self will come out. That's in quotes, This is a good philosophy to have appeared among the Westerners. The concept of die to live comes in the line of Vaishnavism. Hegel was a very important philosopher, and for a Western thinker, his philosophy was very near to that of the Eastern thinkers. In many respects, Hegel's philosophy is very close to that of Ramanuja. Unquote. That's all quote from Guru Maharaj. Then I'm continuing the footnote. Hegel's absolute is not static, but a dynamic existence. And this also has parallels with Vaishnavism, where the Lord is Chit Vilas, a dynamic, spiritually variegated unity. Sridhar Maharaj again, quote, in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, the word vilas means playful movement. You may take it to mean that the Absolute is absorbed in play. Unquote. As a serpent moves in a zigzag way, and in this way makes progress, similarly, quote, the movements of the Absolute are not straight but crooked. The conception of Leela, the divine pastimes of the Lord, is something like that. This is similar to Hegel's opinion, in which the truth develops in a crooked way through thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. There is thesis, then its opposite, and then again they unify and create a new thesis. Then again, antithesis, and a greater harmony in synthesis. End of quote. So that's all the footnote about who and what was Hegel, just in case anyone wants to think about that. So, what did we get to? Okay, he mentioned, because I just mentioned die to live. This means, die to live, to dissolve your ego, your false ego, wholesale, and then you will find your causal self, your true self. The sham, false ego, that must be dissolved. Vidyate hridaya granti, from Bhagavatam. The hard knot in the heart must be dissolved. Then all doubts will be cleared, and you will find that you are quite at home.
Is surrender antithesis to life?
Yeah. See, that can be taken different ways, that thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It works on many levels in different aspects of things, yes. Can be one, yeah. So, like, for example, it can be taken as a conditioned world, and then going to the other extreme of the unconditioned world, and then the synthesis, how to see God in everything. Yeah? Like this. It's one of those things. But I didn't want to get too much into that, because it's going too much off the point. Just to explain a little bit there about Hegel. So here we've got this about with all doubts will be cleared. Vidyate hridaya granti. Hridaya granti means the knot in the heart. Vidyate, to cut or dissolve. And then you'll find that you're quite at home. So this is a footnote I've put, quote, you are quite at home, unquote. That you have no meaning, you have no apprehension, no fear. You know, not intellectually, but experientially, that all is going on by the will and plan of the Lord, and your own interest is fully known and cared for by the Lord and his own, like the Lord's devotee, your loving guardians. Home comfort is an expression Sridhar Maharaj often used in this regard. And in brackets, the English anchoress Julian of Norwich is a funny name. Her name was Julian. Her real name wasn't actually Julian because they don't know what her name was. She was only referred to as Julian of Norwich because she was associated with St. Julian's Church in Norwich. And basically, her dates were 1343 to 1416. So that would be just pre-Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu's 1485 to 1536. So she would be in what was called the late medieval period. She lived at a time of great disruption in England. There was the Black Death. Something like a third of the population died. In the Black Plague, yeah. Carried on rats from Europe. Thank you, Europe, again. And then there was, the 100 Years' War with France. This was all going on. But at the same time, it was a time of great revival in religion and philosophy and spirituality. Many of the great English mystics appeared at that time. So Julian of Norwich, she had a series of visions, which she calls showings. Yeah, insights granted to her when she was very ill, near death, maybe something like a near-death experience, by God the Father, and famously later wrote in her. Became known as the Book of Divine Revelations. She wrote a short one just after it happened, and 20 years later, in her maturity, she wrote a longer and more complete version, Book of Revelations. And so she said there, one of the expressions became very famous, all is well, and all is well, and all things shall be well. In one of her visions, she was shown the world as no bigger than a nut resting in God's loving hand. Even the English proverb has it, God is in his heaven and all is right with the world. Okay, that's the footnote. It's coming from this expression, you are quite at home. Guru Maharaj says, home, like home comfort, yes? So then there's a subheading, surrender and serve. And the devotee asks, you have said that service and surrender are like the two rails of a track. We were explaining before, Guru Maharaj is saying, surrender and service are intimately related. You can't really separate them because service is the natural expression of surrender, of the soul's surrender. So then he's going to go on to say later that, practicing externally the forms of devotion, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity, etc., without surrender, Sharanagati as their basis, may just be empty forms. Yes? Like they may be karma and not bhakti, etc. So Srila Maharaj said, yes, they are like the two wheels on which bhakti is running. That's actually a slightly different analogy, because the devotee said the two rails of a track, and Guru Maharaj said they're like the two wheels on which bhakti is running, but I haven't said a footnote or done anything, because it doesn't matter. It's just two different ways of looking at it, really. There is surrender, and on the basis of surrender, there is service. And that is movement, progress, towards the object of one's surrender. Without surrender, no bhakti can come. And the nature of one's surrender will be traced in service. The two, surrender and service, are coexistent. It reminds me of the story, Srila Prabhupada was on a morning walk in Mayapur every day, and then he used to come back to the temple. Chandrodaya Mandir is probably being under construction at that time. And there was this one devotee, and he used to hang around the temple and he used to wait by the door. When Srila Prabhupada came in after morning walk, he'd go, Jai Prabhupada, And after a few days, Prabhupada looked and said, why don't you do something practical? So, it is like the plan and the work. There is a design and work according to that design. There's surrender and service. Surrender is there, and on that basis, activity, service is going on. Both must be present. So surrender is not only a static, standstill thing, not merely a plane of being, but it is dynamic. Everything in creation, in existence, is dynamic, is progressive. And surrender is also dynamic. It has life, it increases. So I put a footnote here. Srila B.S. Govinda Maharaj sometimes used a phrase which sums up well the meaning here. Quote, surrender does not mean surrender and lie down. Unquote. It is not uncommon that newcomers to the line of devotional service imagine that falling prostrate at the feet of the Guru at the time of initiation or thereafter means they are now a surrendered soul, a fait accompli. Fait accompli means job done, sorted. Of course, the very symbolism of such obeisance points to much more than this. Such obeisance is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 4:34, as pranipat, submission, but the verse also talks of relevant inquiry, pariprashna, and rendering service, sevaya, all parts of true surrender. So surrender is not a one-time event, but an ongoing, increasing movement in the heart of the disciple or servitor, which will naturally manifest in service to the object of his devotion, the Guru, Vaishnava, and the Lord. Krishna consciousness is the path of Sharanagati, surrender. Therefore, to understand at first, at least intellectually, what it means, and then to enter into it, to surrender, is of prime importance. Of course, the theory and the living of it are not the same. Their difference is as great as merely seeing some honey in a glass jar and actually tasting it or drowning in it. Since to be surrendered to the Lord in thought, word, and deed is the constitutional position of the living being, this is and should be quite easy, quite natural. Yet, for the conditioned soul who has wandered so far from home, it is the most difficult. Easy and difficult. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada wrote that, quote, one may surrender to the Lord in a moment, or it may take millions of years. It depends upon the sincerity of the performer, unquote. In the writings of French foundress and spiritual writer Saint Thérèse Chauderec, 1805 to 1885, on this subject of self-abandonment to the Lord, we find, quote, perhaps you think that all this is very difficult. If so, you are wrong. There is nothing so easy and so pleasant. It all amounts to doing something generous for once and all, and saying with total sincerity, my God, I want to be everything for you. Please accept my offering. Then you have said everything that needs to be said. But, she continues, quote, but from then on you must take care to keep your soul in this state. You must not shy away from any little sacrifices that might help you advance in virtue. You must always remember that you have surrendered yourself, unquote. Once the soul is given to the Lord, it is his property. It belongs to him. It is and does actually in any case. One is only returning to the Lord what is his. But once given, it cannot be reclaimed. And I'm giving an example. The great devotee scholar Sanatana Goswami had left his high position and prestige in the government of his day to surrender to the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Later on, he caught a virulent disease while travelling through the jungles of central India. And when he met Lord Chaitanya, the Lord would always embrace him, careless of his weeping sores. Sanatana became depressed about this and made a secret plan to commit suicide by throwing himself under the giant wheels of the Rath Yatra car when the deity of Lord Jagannath left the temple on his famous annual journey. Lord Chaitanya, the omniscient God, knew Sanatana's mind, and when they next met, said, what is this, Sanatana? You have surrendered to me. Therefore your body is now my property. It is not yours to do with as you like. Give up your nonsensical idea. See Chaitanya Charitamrita Anchulila. I have to remember the chapter. In part 3 of this book, Sridhar Maharaj talks at length on the 6 limbs of surrender, and many times we come across the phrase he used about what surrender means, to die to live. He also says that the activities of devotion, hearing about the Lord, chanting his names and glories, and so on, all of these, without surrender as their basis, will be merely empty forms, or at best, some kind of good karma, but not bhakti, devotion. Saint Thérèse Chauderec, the one I mentioned, in her writings, as quoted above, unpacks something of the meaning of self-surrender. She says that the Lord has given us so much, but, quote, human souls fail to do what they should in response to this. They are not generous enough. the main way to follow the path of perfection and holiness is to surrender yourself to our good God, unquote. And then, going to the very heart of the matter, she writes, quote, but what does surrender yourself mean? Although I understand the implication of the two words, I cannot explain them. I only know that they are very accommodating and cover both present and future. To surrender yourself is more than devoting yourself or giving yourself. It is even more than abandoning yourself to God. Surrendering yourself means dying to everything and to the self. It means no longer being concerned with the self, except to make sure that it is always turned towards God. To surrender yourself means no longer looking for your own advantage in anything, either spiritual or temporal. It means not seeking your own satisfaction, but only what God wants. Of course, surrendering yourself also means cultivating the spirit of detachment, which clings to nothing, neither to people nor things, and neither to time nor place, but adheres to everything, accepts everything, and submits to everything. And I just put the reference there in the book. So, oh yes. So, sorry, before that, I'm going to put this part before that. It says, so from different angles and perspectives, from Scripture and from saints, we can try to understand and enter into a life of surrender to the Lord. That's before that quotation. So that was footnote 4. Okay. Then the new subheading, beyond estimation. Back to the text, Sridhar Maharaj. Surrender is also of different types. The surrender of a friend, surrender of a wife, surrender of the parents. It may be of many different kinds. And devotee says, what is the highest kind of service or surrender, Sridhar Maharaj, that is found in consorthood. 24 hours service is possible there. Love in consorthood has been shown to be of the highest type, both in surrender and in service. Surrender to the extreme and service to the extreme, that is found only in consorthood. And in that also there are different types. And Radharani is considered to be the highest. This means that everything, the full serving potency, is coming out from her. She is the main predominated moiety, the predominated aspect of divinity. The entire negative side, the serving aspect, is represented by her, and others are all different developments from her. Her position is such, it cannot be estimated in our puppy brain. And laughter, laughter, they don't laugh, okay. They laugh, anyway. It is beyond our estimation. This is an expression of Saraswati Thakur. We can't accommodate it in our puppy brain. And Guru Maharaj used it, and also Srila Prabhupada used to use it sometimes. And then subheading Krishna confidence. And Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya Dev, who is Radha and Krishna combined, came to inform us about this and to tell us that by getting our admission in this line, serving under the divine guidance of Radharani, we may have experience of such highest quality of rasa, such taste of divine love. That line is called the Rupanuga Sampradaya, and it is the speciality of Mahaprabhu and his followers. This may seem like mere stories, like tales, to us at present, but nevertheless, such a prospect has been given to us if we are able to find it out gradually. Such is our goal, our destination, and it is such a high conception, such Krishna confidence, that we can get the confidence of Krishna, get admission into the confidential service of Krishna, and of such a high type that our future may be connected with that. Subheading here, I am yours, quote. Devotee, I read in one book that Sharanagati is only a mental attitude, whereas Atmanivedanam is full surrender of the soul. He's gone back to that again. Didn't you get it the first time. Sridhar Maharaj laughs. No, no. Who says that Sharanagati is mental, is on the mental level, they are wrong. Oh, that Sharanagati is mental, is on the mental level, not there on the mental level. That Sharanagati is on the mental level. Oh, so take that out. So he says that Sharanagati is mental, on the mental level. Yeah, they are wrong. Mind cannot even touch that level, that plane of Sharanagati. Mind is produced from the workshop of Maya. Then Sharanagati and Atmanivedanam are the same. Sridhar Maharaj, when Sharanagati is analysed, then we find 6 elements there. Anukulyasya Shankalpa Pratikulyasya Vajanam Rakshishyati Vishvasho Goptritve Varanam Tatha Atmanikshepa Karpanye Sadvidha Sharanagati. As you know from your Prapannajivanamritam, the 6 divisions of surrender are to accept those things favourable for devotional service, to reject unfavourable things, the conviction that Krishna will give all protection, to accept the Lord as one's guardian or master, full self-surrender and humility. That's actually quoted in Madhya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 22, but it's coming originally from Vaishnava Tantra. So within these 6 parts of Sharanagati, Jiva Goswami Prabhu points out that Goptritve Varanam, to accept the Lord as master or as guardian, that I am yours, this embracing of the Lord's guardianship is the central element, and the others are all supportive to it. So in Sharanagati, as it is described in Shastra, we find that Atmanivedanam, full self-surrender, constitutes its one part, and another is Atmanikshepa, to throw oneself desperately to the Lord. But they're not in themselves the essential part of Sharanagati. Most principal, most central is Goptritve Varanam, to accept him, the Lord, as one's master and guardian. That I am yours, this is the most vital, central point of Sharanagati, and not to throw oneself. One may throw oneself anywhere and everywhere, but there must be some guardian, and the sense that I am at his disposal. That is the central thought of Sharanagati. And in the subheading, where to throw yourself. Of course, when we look in a more spacious way at Sharanagati, we see that it includes so many parts. To do what is favourable for surrender and service to the Lord, to avoid what is unfavourable to that, and so on. But the main thing, the central nature of Sharanagati is this: I am yours. Merely throwing oneself desperately to any place, that also is not safe. Such desperate bravery, we can see, is shown by different people for different purposes, for political ends, for national freedom. There are so many examples of great risk in self-sacrifice. But that in itself won't come under the jurisdiction of Sharanagati. Sacrifice as Atmanivedanam, full self-surrender of oneself, means it must be located in a proper place, that is, to have the guardian. We must know we have a guardian and that we belong to him, and that we shall give back to him what is his, that is, ourself. I am yours. For so long I was thinking that I belong to me. Now I have come to understand that I don't belong to me. You are my owner and I am your slave. I am your dependent, a part of your potency. I am not independent. I am yours. Neither do I belong to me nor to any other, to so many so-called friends or foes in the world, nor to anything else, like the earth or the sun or air or ether or anything. I belong to you, Krishna. Subheading, drawn to love's center. This is the end part. I belong only to you. And what are you? You are Krishna, the attracting center of everything that exists. Krishna is the all-attracting principle, and attraction in the plane of consciousness, that becomes affection, love. There is attraction in the physical plane, like the sun attracting the earth attracting so many things. This is physical, but when it is endowed with life, when it is spirit-filled, that is prema, love. And that love is in relation to the highest entity, the all-attractor, the personification of love. Through prema we belong to him, and by love's influence there is mercy, harmony, beauty, and they're all divine, and they're all subservient to love. The highest conception of divinity is love. So that's the end of that chapter, which was called Association of the Holy. Yes, nice child, Hare Krishna. 2, 3, 4. And that's it, yeah. Got 10 minutes.
We were mentioning about this antithesis and thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and
Yeah.
there's like a material life, like
Yeah. Yeah. See, it's about harmonizing apparent opposites or integrating them into a unified field, as it's called in subatomic physics. So, for example, Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva, the Lord and his energy, whether you're saying the Jiva's soul or also the material energy, so they are simultaneously and inconceivably one and different. So that's an inconceivable thing. They have an aspect of oneness and an aspect of difference, but both are simultaneous, and both are complete, well, infinite, you might say. So how can it be so? That's why it's called inconceivable. So one has to harmonize them. So you say the Jiva soul is completely different from the Lord, because the Lord is infinite and the Jiva soul is finite. So completely different. That's your thesis. Then your antithesis comes. But hold on. Achinta Bhed Abhed, they're also one and the same. They're also one and the same, not different. In quality, Jivatma, Paramatma, same. Actually, it's not quite exactly the same. Guru Maharaj can make distinction there also. But we're speaking in a general way. So one side, the thesis, says they're completely different. Antithesis, no. They're the same. Okay, but they're one in quality. So then the synthesis comes. Oh, they're one and different, both, simultaneously. That's one example. But, so you could see it in different ways. But, I'm not really a devotee of Hegel, so I couldn't necessarily fully explain it as he conceived it or what he meant. You'd have to ask Lalita Madhava about that. You might know more. But because even Hegel, if you look at it from a philosophical point of view, his teaching or philosophy was actually developed even further by other later philosophers like Kierkegaard. But that doesn't matter. Guru Maharaj is taking some essential point that he has given to these two things. Reality by itself and for itself, meaning the only point of the existence of reality, i.e. of God, Krishna, is for himself. So he's by himself and for himself. The only reason for his existence is he exists for his own purpose. He's very, very selfish, self-serving, yeah. But the thing is that, of course, when the Jiva soul harmonizes with that through Sharanagati, then we get the full benefit of that. As he is enjoying infinitely, then the Jiva soul can enjoy infinitely also.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
just on that subject, what is the difference between a conditioned soul feeling that way about himself, being selfish,
Yeah.
and the law being selfish. What's the difference? Now, because someone can say, yeah, but God is being selfish, why can't I be selfish?
Of course, yeah, they can say that,
Say
yeah.
that, so
Yeah.
what's the difference? Because end of the day, most people are feeling that way inside, you know?
Yes.
God is being selfish, why should I not be selfish?
Yes, but of course, to come to that point of even thinking or understanding, quote unquote, the selfishness of God, in that sense that we're talking by himself and for himself, you know, they would have to have some, I think by the time they sort of got to that point, they would probably have some, at least little understanding, right, of it. And so necessarily that question wouldn't necessarily arise. But yes, a person in general could think that. Which is basically just to say that, yeah, if God is the enjoyer, supreme enjoyer, then why shouldn't I enjoy like him? Which, of course, is the essential reason for the fall of the soul, isn't it? Because the soul, from the Tatashta location, then upon awakening, casting the glance to the side of Maya, and says, oh, that looks very nice. I can be the Lord and Master over Maya, see? As Krishna is the Lord and Master of everything. So, you know, in competition with him, trying to be him or like him, then through a sequence of events unfolding, the soul gradually descends. It doesn't happen all at once. It goes through a process of chitabhas, slowly descending and become. It's like, you know, it's like the entering Earth's atmosphere. You know, gradually more and more dense towards the material side, and then, you know, the coverings, as from the subtle ahamkara first, very like a very light, subtle covering, like a very, like you imagine like a little silk, you know, like a silk cloth, very fine, very gossamer silk. You could hardly see it even, but it's there, you know. It's the first, most subtle covering of that separation, you know, ahamkara. Yeah, desire to be, and then it's sort of, you know, the grosser, then the buddhi, you know, the intellect, the manas, mind, then akash, then, you know, like, you know, air, fire, water, earth, onto the gross physical body, you know, like this. And then one is like really in that sort of conditioned state. And so if you think to go return in the reverse order, to go back to the spiritual world, just imagine how, what that would take, you know, to undo those coverings. Like Guru Maharaj said, it may take lifetimes to strip away even one layer of the false ego, you know. And then sort of, and you know, we know from the story Gopa Kumar in Priya Pokanam how he goes through the layers, and you know, the earth, water, fire, air, and he meets the deities. And finally he gets right to the most subtle part of the material energy itself, the pradhan, which is the material energy before it becomes differentiated even into like the three modes of nature. It's like in a mass. It's called the prakriti, where it's actually the goal or destination of the Buddhists, prakriti nirvana. So it's like in that stage he meets the goddess Prakriti, who is Durga, you know, and he has a talk with her, and at that point she says, "Oh, please stay here with me for some time, and we can have some good times." And he says that Gopa Kumar was somewhat attracted, because that was of a deep blue colour. It reminded him of Krishna, his Lord Gopal. But eventually he had to leave and he went out, he continued, and then he crossed that covering and entered into the Paravyom, the light, the spiritual sky. And then he became aware of this blazing light, you know, like a sun. And he was looking, what's that? And sometimes it seemed to have take form, will have a form, and then the form is like merging back into the light, and then coming in a form and merging back. And he also saw many beings, kind of celestial, spiritual beings, surrounding this light, like orbiting around. Maybe where that could be the Christian conception of the seraphim. You know, the seraphim, these angels of light made of fire. They're the highest order in the hierarchy of angels. And they're supposed to actually surround the throne of God. And they don't have any function in regards to the material world. Whereas the lower order of angels, you know, about the planets and things like that. But anyway, so he's looking like that, and this is the first manifestation of the personal form of the Lord, called Kala, representing time, infinite time. And so he's somewhat attracted when he sees the form of the Lord, and then when it goes back to like apparently formless, he can feel himself like being drawn magnetically into it, like he's going to disappear or become nothing, and he's like becoming scared and he's pulling himself out again, and this way, and then his journey's continuing if you read it. Yeah. So, but anyway, so at every stage along the way, there are different things, different attractions and different. So one has to be very, very dedicated and fixed in the vow of, like devotional service, not to be deviated by these things. It's like when you're going up in a lift in a department store. It's like got 6 floors, and the lift stops, ding, the doors open, and this is like so many things, there on that floor, and you say, wow, what's that? And you want to go out and no, just wait and close it and go up again, ding, just wait, and you just wait, and going on and up and up. So, but we see that Gopakuma himself, he was sometimes, stopping, and he was meeting with those beings on those different demigods, and he was spending some time there, and he was getting the association of the Lord in that level, but after some time, his fascination was going down, and he was becoming a little bit dry and tasteless. And it was coming, to go forward again. And then he was chanting his mantra, his Gopal mantra, 12-syllable mantra, he received from his guru. But actually, his guru was actually Krishna, took the form of his guru. And it was like a whole story to go back to Krishna. So then, by chanting his guru on the potency of that mantra, he was like going up, moving up there to the next stage, And then you see, it's going on and on and on. Eventually, of course, ultimately, until he meets his Lord, Krishna, Gopal. Even he went to, when he finally arrived in the Vaikuntha, and each time he thought, this is definitely it, this must be it, this is the ultimate, it couldn't be more than this, it's amazing, And he was waiting by the gates of the Vaikuntha, and the Vaikuntha Vasis were going in and out in their four-arm form. And they look because they have this Svarup Siddhi, same form as the Lord. Exactly the same, can't tell the difference, except for a couple of things. The mark of Srivats on the chest of the Lord, and this white hair, called Srivats, and this jewel, called Kaustuba jewel. But otherwise, forearms with the astras and everything. And so each time they said, just wait here, we'll go and inform the Lord that you've come, and you can come in. So each time they were going in and out, and each time one would come, he'd be more glorious and more incredible than the previous. Said, this is definitely the Lord, and he'd bow down. They go, what are you doing? It's not me, no. I'm a humble servant of the Lord. So finally the servant came back and said, okay, can go in. They went in, and then Lakshmi and Narayan were in the palace, the central place, and they were having a soiree, sort of evening party, and Narad was there, and laughing and telling jokes and things, and there was music and dancing, So when he saw Lord Narayan, his mind went blank. He sort of thought, because he saw that colour, that dark blue colour, and the beautiful ornaments and things, he thought, and he ran forward towards the head. He said, Gopal, it's me. I'm back, And then the servants they sort of arrested him, Said, you can't do that, he's Lord Narayan, And Narad, he was there and he understood. So he said to them, look, don't worry, I'll take care of it, I understand what's going on. And so then he got the darshan of Lord Narayan and Lakshmi, and he was there for some time. And even the Vaikuntavasis were saying, look, stay here. And what is this dress you're wearing, this simple, this is like, dress of some gopin, someone looks after the cows, It's not very, you can have a form like us and dress like us and be one. And he's going, no, it's okay, I'm like this. Then after some time, he went on. So it's like that. Selection and elimination, this is the progress always. To consolidate oneself in a certain position. And then practicing there, and in that way, if one is very sincere, by the grace of the Lord, some opening will come from the higher level, and one will feel attraction and a drawing to that level, to go up, to leave one's present position, and then continue. So, but first of all, one must become consolidated. You can't rush, you can't speed up the process, because if you haven't consolidated in each stage, then you'll be falling back, right? Like a caterpillar, it's attached to one leaf, and then it reaches up, and when it's attached to the higher leaf there, then it can pull up its legs, it's safe. So this way, it's development and progress. Hare Krishna. Sorry, I'm a bit late there. So we'd like to ask our newly arrived guest, would you chant Harima? If you like, please, your friends. I've lost a page here. Very disturbing. Hari Harai Nama Krishna Yadevaya Nama. Hari Harai Nama. Gadadhara Shiva Shani Jai Rupa Sambandha Vijiva Gopal Tatya Jai Goshai Sharanagati Nitya Gosaya Be Braje Korava Sri Radha Krishna Nitya Anande Palo Hari Bhajavinava Vajayamana Shri Guru Vaishnava Pada Padma Koriyas Shri Guru Vaishnava Pada Padma Koriyas Hari Nam Sankirtan Hari Naratam Moda Hari Nam Sankirtan Hari Naratam Moda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gauravatta Hare Krishna Jai Shri Harinama Sankirtan Ki Jai Shri Gurudev Shri Guru Maharaj Shri Acharya Maharaj Ki Jai Gaura Premanandi Hari Bol